Hey guys, welcome to next tutorial. This one's going to show how we draw the second part to this, and I call it the toe line launcher. Just go back to the assembler here. You can see there it is on the back of my snow speeder. So last lesson we drew this base section here in white, and now we're going to draw this. I'm going to call it the toe line barrel in black. So we need to draw that individually. You can see here's one I've drawn before, and if we just use the timeline once again to roll back, and you'll see how I went about drawing this to give you an idea. Grab the timeline, move it back one, you can see that I'd revolved. That actually might be better to go right back to the beginning and show you where I started, I suppose. I'll just turn the sketch on. So I started with circle, then extruded it, and you'll notice I extruded it in equal distance both sides of the original sketch. Then drew another sketch on that same plane through the center, and then revolved that sketch to give me the barrel shape. So we'll do exactly what I've just done there with a new design. So let's go File, New Design. Straight away let's save that thing. What do I call it? Toe line barrel. That sounds good. Make sure it's in the right folder. Click on Save and go to your sketch icon and choose the vertical plane, and let's put a circle on there. Always start in the center and drag it out, and I can tell you that the diameter of that circle down the bottom of that cylinder is 4.2. So punch that in and then zoom in on that so you've got the right sort of scale, and then finish that sketch. I always like to go to 3D view by clicking on home there, and we're going to now extrude this circle and make a cylinder, but because we're going to be drawing on the center of this later on, rather than extruding it like left or right, we're going to extrude it symmetrical, so the same amount left and right. So select the profile, come up to the extrude button like you normally would do, and when you come to this part about direction, change it from one side to symmetrical. And as you can see here, as I move the arrow on one side, it repeats the same on the other side. So to give us a thickness in total of 0.9, that's going to be 0.45 in distance. So 0.45. I think that's going to give me a distance of 0.9, or is that the overall distance? Now let's see if it's fine. Let's see what happens. Yeah, okay, let's try that. So I'll click enter. I think that's the right size. Let me just check. So we go to the inspect tool here, and then I can click onto this circle to this circle, and it tells me that that distance is 0.9, which is correct. So there's a really handy tool to use, is the inspect tool. Inspect, measure. Don't worry about all those ones down here, but that's a really handy tool. You can measure stuff on the fly. Alright, so there's the first part of that cylinder. I might just turn that sketch back on so I can see. And the reason I turned that back on, by going to sketches and you turn sketches off and on, you can see now the black line I should say, which represents the original work plane. So now I'm going to draw the second part. I'll start back to the one I've already finished, and you can see we started off with this thick cylinder, and then we've revolved this other section on top of it. So if we go back to our drawing, let's choose the plane in the center like so, click on sketch, and let's start putting in a profile that we can revolve to create the barrel shape. So using your line tool, come from the center of the object and come up a distance of 16 millimeters, the length of that line. And on the end of that line, I want you to put in a circle with a diameter of 2.8. Once again, all these sizes I got by measuring the object with calipers. So a diameter of 2.8. Remember, this works always in diameter. And then I'm going to draw another line parallel to the first line, so joining it down the bottom, not joining it, just starting it somewhere down here in space. Like that's probably the wrong thing to say. I need to actually draw a line a certain length here first. So draw that line in, and then let's find out what dimension that is, that line. And I want you to set that dimension to 0.85. And then from the end of that line here, click once, and then come up and let it snap onto the edge of the circle. You can see that cross comes up, which means it's snapping to it, and that should be sufficient. Now what we need to revolve here is only half of the object. So what I am going to do is continue with drawing another line from the center of the circle to the top of the circle, and then I'm going to use the trim tool by pushing T. I'm going to get rid of that half of the circle, and I'm going to get rid of this little section inside here, which will then leave me with this closed profile which I can now revolve. So we'll finish the sketch at that point. I like to turn things 3D, and you can see there's the sketch. I've highlighted it, come up to the revolve tool like we've done before, and it's asking for the axis. Now you can see the profile has been selected. Click into the axis box and then choose that center line being the axis. It gives you the preview in red. At the moment it's saying cut, so in actual fact we don't want it to be cut, we want it to be joined. Changes it from red to that blue and grey colour. And I can see I've got an error with my original cylinder. I'll have to go back and fix that later on. So click OK, and the barrels part is correct, but I'm looking here, that cylinder down the bottom there is definitely not the right width. So I'm just going to go back to my drawing that I already did to find out what width this cylinder was. So I'm going to go back to that extrusion. Actually, better still, rather than do that, I'm going to measure it. I'm going to click on one side, click on the other, and if you look at the distance, it's 1.8. So there's my mistake. So that was 0.9 from either side, 1.8 in total. So I need to edit this extrusion here now. So if I go back, you can see I'm highlighting the extrusion in the timeline. I right click, edit, and up here, instead of it being 0.45, it needs to be 0.9. Click on OK, and now we can see we've got the correct thickness. Alright, so hit save, and that's that part done. We might as well just assemble these now together so we can put them both together. So to create a sub-assembly drawing, a sub-assembly of two parts, you always start with a blank file. And never start with the part you've just drawn and then add parts to it, because it won't arrange those correctly in the drawing. So file, new, so you've got a totally blank page if you like. And then come over to your library over here and right click on the parts that you want to insert. So right click on the toe line base, insert into current design. Okay, it's asking me to save that before I can insert it, so I just need to find it up here. There it is there. I hadn't saved it. Oh, okay, maybe I had saved it. Oh goodness, where is that part? Let's click on save there to make sure all these parts are saved. It says that's saved, that's interesting. Alright, I might hit refresh to see what's going on there. I'm just going to go back to Mr. Untitled. Oh, I had to save the Untitled view first. Goose. Alright, so click on save and give it a name. So I'm going to call this toe line subassembly. It's not a complete assembly, it's a subassembly. Click on save. Gives it its name. Once we've named it, now we can add these parts in. Okay, right click on the base, insert into current design, give it a few seconds. There's the base. You can just leave it as is and click OK. But to stop this base from moving around now, here it is, here you can see it in the file tree. Select it, right click, and the first option is ground. Ground means that it puts a little pin onto it, and it's going to stay in space, so the other part will then come onto it if it's in the correct orientation. Deselect everything and then come over to the barrel, which looks like I've got two there. I'm going to take my second one, insert into current design, give it a few seconds for it to grab it off the cloud. And what we want to do here is we want to move the object so it's almost in the correct position to put a joint up between the two of them. So using the different handles and so on here, I'm going to rotate this around 90 degrees. And you can see now these are kind of in the correct orientation. I'll click OK at that point, and then we're going to apply a joint between the barrel and the other part here. So I'm going to click on joint, and it's asking for the first component. So if I hover my cursor over this circumference, you'll see that a center point then also highlights. So it's going to locate this object onto here via the center point, and you can also see on the base I've got a similar circle drawn. So if I hover there, go to the center, click once, and then if I just use my orbit tool, and I'm just going to try to find the center of this circle here. Now as I move my cursor around, jumping to different spots, I'm going to zoom in, and you can just see there, as I hold my cursor there, you can see the center of that circle has now become selectable. So we click onto that, and you see now it lines up those two. Now at this point, the type of joint that's chosen is rigid, which means we can't move it or anything like that. What I'll get to do is to change it to revolute, and you can see it gives you a preview of the angle that you can revolve it between. So I'm going to grab that little revolve tool and just bring it down here like it was going to be firing at the back of my snow speeder. You can change things like the axis that revolves around and so on, but everything else should be pretty right. Click on OK, save it again of course, and you are then ready to put that onto your main construction, or your main part I should say. Alright, so that was using the combination of the extrude, symmetric, and once again drawing a profile and revolving it, and then assembling the two together. Alright.